It was several years ago, and I was sitting on the couch in Seattle, Washington, and I was eating grapes, red grapes, and I was going out of control with them. Like I was intended to eat just a little handful, and I was going out of control. Now that wasn't what I usually binged on. It was much worse. It was sugar and carbs and, bad stuff. But I'd been free from it for a little while, and I was starting to lose it, and I started to eat the grapes, and I knew in that moment I was about to go back up the scale again. I was going to gain those 40 pounds right back again, like I had for so many years doing the yo-yo thing. And I thought to myself, Larry, I cannot do this the rest of my life. I cannot do this. And that's when I realized if I don't stop dieting, if I don't stop doing the same old, the diet and exercise merry-go-round, I was never going to be able to lose weight and keep it off.
I'm Dr. Larry Burchett, and as I see in the ER every day, life can change in a moment. Here on the show, we tell the stories that matter most, after which we are never the same. We've got a wonderful guest for you today, Tricia Nelson, emotional eating expert.
Hey, good to see you, Larry.
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here.
Me too.
Dr. Kellyanne Petrucci, who came on the show earlier, referred you to me, gave me your book, and I took a look at it, and I was like, oh, this is great stuff. We've got to have you on the show.
Thank
so
you.
welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
This. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your emotional eating expert. What does that mean?
Well, basically, it means that I specialize in helping people with emotional eating. It could mean the other way. I specialized in emotional eating for a long time. I was 50 pounds overweight, so I know a lot about emotional eating. But I do, for the last 30 years, since I got help for myself, I have been helping other people overcome emotional eating. So it was a kind of a grueling process for me to get there. Obviously being overweight, obese, technically, was really painful. And so I'm really connected to how painful it is for people in this world to be carrying around extra weight, especially in our culture that does not look positively on that. And it's painful personally, professionally, every which way. So yeah, that's what I do. I've been doing it for 30 years. I love what I do because I get to help people break free from their bondage to food. And in my experience, this is really the missing link in the whole weight loss conundrum, is the emotional eating piece. People know what to eat. They're not stupid, but they can't follow through. And when they address the emotional eating and why they're emotionally drawn to foods, especially foods that are unhealthy for them, then they can finally follow through on what they know is good advice.
That sounds great. I'm really intrigued. I'm like, what is the answer? I zipped through your book today, and I, read a lot of your story, which was, you really put a lot in there. Even starting from your childhood and how you had tried all of these different things, Overeaters Anonymous and therapists, and all these different diets and all these things, and books and self-help, you name it, didn't work. And just going through this and hearing kind of a philosophy of superficial symptoms, treating that, not getting you the results you want, and then you kind of dealing with the deeper issues, including trauma and all of that, I'm like, I really like that. I feel like that's one of the core things that as an ER doctor, when I see people coming in over and over, I'm like, there's pills and there's diet and exercise, and that's important, but its behavior is superficial and it can change, and it's like getting into that deeper stuff, that when you deal with the deepest stuff, then it's the most lasting for health and happiness and all that stuff. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm really interested to see what you have for us.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think everybody who struggles with food and weight, including myself, starts with the physical. It's like, I'm overweight, let's get this weight off. Diets are the first thing we turn to. So when I was a kid, even as young as 12 years old, I was dieting. And I know girls in our country are doing that too. And young girls, it's getting probably even younger than that, 7, 8, 9. Young girls and some boys are using diets as well to try to control their weight, which is tragic. And for me, I just assumed that it was, just a diet. Like if I dieted, then I'd lose the weight. But, you start going down that road, you try 3, 4, 5, 6 diets, you start to see a pattern. Unfortunately, that's the only thing people know how to do, diet and exercise. So again, as a young person, I was doing exercise programs and gyms and that kind of thing, and pills and potions and lotions and all these different quote solutions.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, I think I was really blessed that at a young age, I put 2 and 2 together, and I thought, none of these things are going to get me where I need to go. And I talk to women, in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who have been doing that for 30 plus years, that merry-go-round of dieting and exercise programs. And, and I just was blessed to learn early on that that's not going to help me. Like, I saw the writing on the wall, and that's when I started looking for a deeper solution. So, I started with 12-step programs and therapy. I went to an eating disorders therapist, but even that deeper solution didn't heal me either.
What were you, now having gone through this and kind of looking back, what were you looking for?
In those things I was doing?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, again, once you realize that dieting is not, 98% of all diets fail. Like, dieting is not going to be the solution to someone's chronic weight struggles.
Dieting meaning a temporary, restrictive way of eating for 30 days or something.
Yes, exactly. Quick fixes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's what I mean by diets. I mean, obviously what you eat is impacting your health, positive or negative. But what I mean is the quick fix mentality of, let me do this will fix me. But you go on a diet, you have to come off a diet, and that's obviously not sustainable. And so when I started going deeper and trying therapy and that kind of thing, you'd think that would be the solution, the deeper search of your soul.
I saw that in your book, and I was like, oh, it sounds like she's saying that didn't do it.
No, and the reason, my
experience
is, the reason is because I was trying to deal with it at an intellectual level, and it's not a head level, it's really a heart level, this problem. And so that's really where I needed to go. And in therapy, I was kind of just mentally working on the mental and thinking about my thought patterns and talking about my past and my family history and that kind of thing. But I was still up here. So I could talk about stuff.
Disconnected.
Very much so. That's exactly right. Is I could talk about trauma and pain, but my heart was still had all that pain locked inside, and I could not unlock that. I didn't feel safe enough. And so I just would, again, I'd talk a good game, but I was disconnected, just like you said. And so that didn't release it either. And if I have all that pain, I'm going to need a painkiller. And it's something I talk about in the book is the PEP. Basically, I say to people, there's 3 primary emotions that are driving one's eating.
I want to show this thing.
Okay,
it's
cool.
That little matrix, right?
Yeah,
I liked that. I thought that graphic was helpful.
Yep.
Go ahead and keep explaining, and I'll pull up the
I call
picture.
it the Pap Test. And basically, that is these are the 3 primary
talking about this guy,
drivers. Right? Yeah. So the painkiller.
We get that?
So the painkiller, we use food as a painkiller. Number one thing, it's like pain from our jobs, pain from relationships that aren't working for us, pain from childhood emotions, trauma, that kind of thing. So that's emotional pain we cover up with food. That's why we don't eat salads when we binge. Okay, we want the heavy, like starchy, sugary, fatty foods. They're the yummiest for us, not only because they are yummy, give you that, but also they deaden our emotions. So when you're binging on Doritos and ice cream, you're feeling no pain. Let's be clear. It's a good way to just numb out.
It's a drug, yeah.
Totally. And so, that carb coma, that doesn't come from nowhere. It's like you're just numbed out. And so it works. It kills emotional pain. People don't think of that. They think, oh, I love cake. I love cake, and I did too. But there's a deeper motivation there that people are not connected to until they watch the show and they start tuning in. That's what happened for me is I just started getting aware of these things. So the E in the PEP stands for...
I think I want to go back to the pain thing, the painkiller. But exactly what you said, the question that I ask a lot is, how do you self-medicate?
It's a great question.
Food. So I see food is absolutely so available, easy.
Yeah.
and the very powerful
Sure
food medicine,
thing.
what you're just talking
Yeah.
about, the hyper palatable, the stuff that tastes the best.
Yep.
And that make just like, oh, I just want to watch a movie and relax.
You're just so
It's just
chilling
like,
after.
I just want to
after
like
that carb.
popcorn
Yeah.
candy and let me just watch
Yeah,
Tom
everybody
Cruise
knows what that's
blow
like.
something up, you know,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. And I see alcohol and there's a lot of different ways
Porn,
people can.
sex addiction, attention addiction, work addiction, exercise addiction. There's tons of ways for us to self-medicate. There's no question about
How do you
it.
self-medicate?
Yeah.
How do you self-medicate? It's such an insightful, scary question. And then
And
what
so
are you
important.
self-medicating?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get back to this thing.
So the E and the Pap test stands for escape. So people are escaping fear and anxiety, okay? Worry, anxiety. And this is big because there's a lot of things to worry about, you know, finances, relationships, politics, you know, war, all kinds of children's
Unending.
schooling. I mean, it's like, it is unending, you know? And so, and emotional eaters specifically and especially tend to worry more than your average person. Okay, now I just want to have one little thing here to insert, and that is that I think everybody to some degree is an emotional eater. So it's a spectrum, and I just want to say that. It's really important that, you know, I talk about emotional eaters, and these are ones that are chronically dieting, chronically struggling with their weight. But I think as humans, we're rigged to have an emotional connection to food, so we'll keep eating and subsist, right, as a species. So I think everybody, like you said, can relate to too much popcorn, too much ice cream, too much pie at Thanksgiving, whatever.
I will admit, you know, I'm very aware of this now, and it's funny how it happens, but sure, do I do that? Absolutely.
Everybody does.
Absolutely. And what has been really insightful for me lately is I'll notice when I get certain emotions, when I'm disappointed or have a bad day or my mood's down or whatever, I will feel certain cravings. And what are they for? Popcorn and candy, McDonald's, Taco Bell, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not this. It's this feeling is driving that behavior. And what is my body really saying? It's saying it needs some comfort.
Yeah.
And that is a way that I've learned that if I slam a Big Mac fry, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how much I used to
Well, at least you're honest
the
about
McDonald's thing, or like 3 tacos and a couple double-decker tacos. Like, I know how you think that's funny over there. And the whole thing is Sprite or whatever at the end. Like, I know how I'm going to feel. And it's
Yep.
whatever. And so, like, that's like the next level thing for me is like, okay, what happened? How did I get
Yeah.
here?
Why did we do that?
What's a more healthy behavior to regulate that emotion? I absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think everybody does.
No shame.
Yeah.
No shame.
No, and it's
And you
it's
know
too
what?
easy.
And I would say this too, on an order of things like, that's less destructive than I'm not doing a hit of Coke, I'm not killing myself.
Sure, sure.
Like it can temper. It isn't positive or whatever, but there's worse ways to self-medicate.
Yeah, and a steady, you know, habit of it will kill you. You know, if you do it long
Certainly
enough.
shorten your life. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, in some ways it'd be great if we ate a Big Mac and we dropped dead. You know, then we'd get the message really fast.
You'd get instant feedback.
Yeah,
Instantaneous feedback.
That's not healthy, but we don't, and it's just a subtle thing that we do continuously, and it, you know, for the people who are really chronic about it can't scale back, and that's really the difference between the ones who are just emotional eaters, do it once in a while, feel sick, exercise more at the gym the next day. You know, those people versus the people like me where I couldn't stop, you know. I mean, I'd go on a 4,000 calorie binge, you know, and I'd feel.
What would you eat?
What would I eat? My big things were ice cream and popcorn and candy, lots of sugar. So maybe pizza, you know, some salty. You gotta have salty with the sugar.
I was gonna say, is it you like all three?
Yeah, all of it. Oh God, but I would just pound that stuff until I was sick. But the problem with me is I wouldn't go to the gym next day. I'd feel so sick I wouldn't have anything to do with going to the gym.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't run after that. I just felt so sick and self-hating. And so that's more on the high end of the spectrum, is sort of your lack, like I call it, you know, consequences and control. Okay, the more consequences you have and the less control you have over your behavior, that's when you get into the addiction range of the eating, the food addiction range, which it was for me, because I go down that spiral and it could be weeks before I'd come out of it, and 10 pounds, 20 pounds later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's, that's
So yours
what a lot
was
of
almost
people,
like a depressive dive, and you'd
like
binge more during
binge
that.
eating. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yep. And I just talked to so many women, especially, who do that, and they don't want to go out at night with their friends. They don't want to socialize. They just want to hole up in their home and keep eating, and it just feeds on itself, and isolation drives it. So it's like you just stay at home, and that just, again, it just exacerbates the problem. So that's really where I was, because I couldn't control it or just spring back and just, get those 5 pounds off, or go on a cruise, eat too much, and then come back and do extra, calisthenics or whatever. It's like it would just go on until I'd finally go on a diet or something, but that was so short-lived for me, and I'd always be back.
When are we talking about? Is this like your 20s or like?
For me, I got help really young, so for me it was my early 20s, and then what happened was I met somebody who had been morbidly obese and healed by by the means I'm talking about, which is
this guy
internal.
in the book.
Yep.
What was Joe something?
Roy.
Roy.
Yep. Roy Nelson. And so I had, I basically learned how to go deeper and do that inner work and change my behaviors, like get more connected with myself and my inner, like, emotional self, and like things that seemed to have nothing to do with food, but it completely changed my whole eating world as well. And that's what I did, as I took the work that I'd done with him, because after he helped me, and I was able to keep the 50 pounds off for a long time, I started working with him to help others, and then eventually started Heal Your Hunger and really codified the work that we had done, which was just sort of spiritual work, but I put it into a very specific system for overcoming emotional eating, because his work had been with addiction, like all different kinds of addictive behaviors.
I see.
So I just straight up emotional eating, because that's the thing that's closest to my heart, and that's how Heal Your Hunger came to be.
And what is Heal Your Hunger?
Heal Your Hunger is really a system for healing one's inner hunger. So, but can I get back to the PEP, because I feel bad for leaving people hanging with that.
Sure, we're just rolling with it.
I know we are.
Okay, well, we
I'll
got to
answer that
finish
question.
PEP.
I want to just finish it in case anybody's like, wait, what's the last P? The last P is punishment. Okay, so I talk about escaping from fear, and anxiety, because we worry about a lot of things, and food just kind of, helps us chill out and not worry.
And guilt.
Gives us that serotonin hit. But the last one is punishment, and the reason why that's there is because even though people think of food as a treat, like I'm going to treat myself tonight, or it's the end of the week, I'm going to go all out and have my favorite sundae or whatever. If people lose control and they've eaten a lot, like to the point of feeling stuffed, that's not a treat. Like, that's punishment, because the next day we don't want to go out with friends. We've got zits on our face. We're bloated. We're feeling disgusting, self-hating. Like, what? Like, why did I do that? I'm such a slob. Like, I know better. All that self-recrimination. So that's really punishment. And people do use food as a form of punishment, and that's because of underlying guilt. And so emotional eaters, in my experience, are very prone to feeling guilty. Like, we feel bad about everything, sometimes for breathing. And so it's
That's
just a
shame,
trait.
shame,
All that
shame.
shame. So that's really a trait of emotional eaters as well. So I just wanted to close that loop there on the PEP.
Good.
But the hunger, back to your question, we have a deeper hunger, and a lot of it is for connection and community. And that's a big part of my programs, is connecting emotional eaters together, because nobody could understand this condition like somebody who's had it. It's hard to describe it to somebody. Most people are like, oh, just moderate. I call it the M word. Just moderate, just pull back, or, just exercise more or whatever. But for somebody who's an emotional eater and they're really out of control, they can't moderate. Like, they're like, I can't have one handful of chips. Like, I can't have 2 Hershey's Kisses. Like, I want the whole bag, and that was me. And so there are people in the world who they do not have that little lever that's like, okay, let's stop now. It just goes on and it gets ugly. And so to me, that really has to do with, I mean, so many things, and I describe the anatomy of the emotional eater in my book, but which we can talk about. But the hunger is a deeper hunger. I mean, to me, it's ultimately a spiritual hunger.
That's what it sounds like you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, we're wanting a sense of wholeness and connection, and spiritually, and I don't mean religious even. It's just a sense of well-being and oneness with our fellow, people, oneness with God. It's really a spiritual hunger. But we get that through people as well. I believe God works through people, and so community is a big part of our hunger. Emotional eaters are incredibly isolated because there's so much shame, because we feel like we're the only ones who have eaten this way or eaten out of the garbage. That was a trick of mine. Like, I'd eat so much food and feel so disgusted. And I tried to be bulimic. I couldn't be bulimic. I tried to vomit. I couldn't, by the grace of God, I couldn't do that. But so I get so sick and I'd throw the rest of the food out. And then a couple hours later, I'd reconsider that decision and I'd go back and retrieve it from the garbage.
You would take that food.
I would literally be like, I remember I threw some of those cookies out. I'm going to go get those,
Well, maybe they're okay.
Right? And so, and there's so much shame in that kind of behavior. I mean, emotional eaters have done really shameful things around food or around trying to get the weight off.
Just feeling terrible.
Yeah, but the problem is we always think we're the only ones who do this. Like, we're always like, oh, if anybody ever knew what I do with food or how much I think about food. Lo and behold, there are jillions of people who do. And in my programs, they feel so happy that they're not the only ones and they can talk about it with each other.
Feel normal and not like there's something so wrong with you
that you
do whatever.
Totally. A sense of being a pariah and the only one just feeds on itself and actually drives people to eat more. Isolation is the hardest thing for this, and it just perpetuates the problem because we don't have anybody to talk to. We can't get our, really our feelings out. We have nobody else to relate to. We're beating on ourselves, beating the crap out of ourselves for our behavior. But when we realize how common it really is, it really just takes a load off of people. Then they can start the healing journey. Plus, just the mutual support is so important as well. Just helping each other and getting out of our own heads is so important.
Yeah, all these elements to this. These are, I remember your C's. Community and connectedness are a couple of them.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so important.
I want to hear more about the book.
Okay.
We here on Life Can Change in a Moment, we talk about moments. Do you have a moment that comes to mind?
Moment. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So after all these things that I'd tried, which I talked about already, I was at a point in my life where I felt completely hopeless. So what my pattern was, Larry, is I would, I'd get on a diet or a food program or some eating plan. I'd do it for a while. I'd lose weight. Like, it would work. I mean, diets are wonderful at first, if you can do, at first you're all psyched up. I'm going to do this, and you're going to the gym and you're like rah, rah, and people feel your energy and it's great. But then, truthfully, all those feelings that we were shoving down with food start bubbling up. And that's when I would always get uncomfortable and I'd get depressed, actually. And this was a long time ago, before depression was a known, thing. It wasn't so talked about, So I'd start up really uncomfortable feelings, and I'd get so just uncomfortable and wiggy in my own skin that I'd eat again. I'd start obsessing about my favorite foods, and then before you know it, it was Katie bar the door. I couldn't hold back. That happened over and over and over again.
So you would have success for a period of weeks, couple weeks,
couple weeks, usually it's about
and then these other issues would come back.
Yeah, this one time was actually about 9 months. I had lost a good 40 pounds or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was great. The thing about weight loss that's so wonderful is that it's an obsession in and of itself. So while you're losing weight and people are commenting and noticing you're getting all this attention, you're fitting into better clothes, you're pulling those ones from the back to the front. I had 5 sizes of jeans in my closet, so I'm getting the skinnier jeans out. Wow. I'm feeling great. And so that in of itself will feed you for a while. That'll replace
that positive reinforcement.
Yeah, it works for a while. It's wonderful. But, you know,
Interesting.
over time, people can kind of get used to it. They're not noticing anymore. They don't care. You know, you're not getting filled that way. And then that real emptiness, that real hunger that we haven't addressed because we're just so focused on the surface and the food and the weight loss, that hunger begins to emerge and we get really uncomfortable. And if we don't realize what's going on, we go back to the food. And so that's what happened for me. I had lost a bunch of weight. I was starting to like have all these feelings bubble up, I was getting depressed, and I didn't know what I was feeling.
And there wasn't a life event that triggered this?
No,
loss or change, or you
nope,
just
this was inside of me.
This is
like
just
this
your
is
pattern.
the hole in my soul that I filled for years with food. And then I was losing weight, and so I was filling that hole in my soul with the joy and excitement of weight loss.
Accomplishment of weight loss.
Yeah, you know, and new clothes and looking great, ego hits, you know, guys noticing, it feels good.
Yeah.
But it's still surface stuff. It's still, I'm feeding myself with like not real food, you know, I'm feeding myself with ego hits. You know, I always say, feed the ego, starves the soul. You know, so it won't last. Just like food doesn't last, it won't satisfy you for very long, and neither will your ego. You know, so what happened for me in my moment was that I had lost a bunch of weight, and I was at that point when I was about to put the weight back on, as I always had. So I always put the weight back on, and I was at that point where it's sort of like the spring in my gut. You know, I just started feeling uncomfortable and not right, and nothing satisfied me, and I didn't have food to satisfy me. I was doing different things to distract myself. I was buying a lot of new clothes. I was dating. I actually dyed my hair a little. I had the lock of hair I dyed purple.
Oh, getting crazy.
Yeah, like I was like, whatever I could do for like a, you know, just excitement or a hit that wasn't food. But ultimately, food comes back, you know.
It's funny you call it a hit, like a little hit of dopamine.
Yeah, right? So it was that moment. I was sitting on my couch. I'm starting to eat grapes uncontrollably.
Grapes?
Summertime. Yeah, not like a handful, like I was eating a bowl of grapes. Sugar, great sugar, you know? But that was, I knew what was coming next. Like grapes, of course, aren't going to kill me. No big deal. But it was the beginning of my starting to be out of control. And I knew I was about to slide right back into hell like I always had and put the weight back on. I had done that several times already.
Yeah.
Lost 20, gained 30, lost 10, gained 11, you know, up and down, up and down. Yeah. So I just had that sense of, I'm going to do this again. And not only that, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. Like, this is how it's going to go the rest of my life, is up and down, up and down, up and down. And it was that moment of just like, I'm screwed. Like, I'm screwed because I knew it was unhealthy to gain and lose weight like that. And I was young, but I literally was looking at like 80 more years of this same pattern, which is actually true. You know, I mean, I talk to women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s all the time, and this has been their life for 30 years, is this yo-yoing up and
Miserable.
down. It is miserable. And if it colors your whole reality. People live with it. Again, it's not drug addiction. You don't have a needle in your arm. You're not ostracized, I mean, for the most part.
Yeah.
You can live with this addiction, unfortunately, in some cases, because it doesn't drive people to actually take action, the right actions to get better. They just keep doing the same old, same old. So that was my moment, is when I realized this is the, you know, if I don't do something drastically different, a whole new tack, that's what I'm looking at.
You're eating, and this is the grapes.
I was eating
This
grapes.
is the grape moment.
Yeah, I was eating grapes. I had lost a bunch of weight, and I was just about to, I knew I was going back up the scale again. I knew it. Because I always had, and I had that spring in my gut that it was getting tighter and tighter. And
you could
I was
feel this.
just about to binge again after 9 months of not overeating.
So what did you do in that moment?
So there was nothing in that exact moment except that I just sort of woke up to the fact that I'm in big trouble, you know. And then what happened during the next couple weeks is I had already been praying, but I prayed more for a solution, and that's when I met this man who helped me, or I heard him. I knew him, but I had heard him speak at one point, and I asked him to help me, and he guided me. He became my mentor. And that was about within 2 weeks' time of that moment on sitting on my couch and the added prayer. So I don't think there's any coincidence there. So I just,
What was your prayer?
It was just like, it was a prayer of desperation. Like, just God help me. It wasn't real specific. It was just like,
Help.
it was sort of like, I'm screwed, help. You know, which is sort of helpful. It's like, that's the best kind of prayer.
It's a real prayer.
Yeah. Like, I'm out of solutions. Help.
Your wit's end.
Yeah.
So you were 20 something. This happened when you were down. You said down 40 pounds.
I was down 40 pounds. Yeah.
But you could kind of feel yourself. And you said there wasn't some outside stress. This was just you kind of.
It was reaching my goal weight. What was my goal weight at the time, and not having anywhere else to go. Not having anything else to strive for. You know, so long as the goal is out here, you can be like, I'll be happy when.
Why were you at your goal? Because you could have, in that moment, you could have just been like, oh, 5 more pounds. Oh, I'm going to get into bodybuilding and reduce my body fat anymore.
That's how anorexia happens.
Oh, I'm going to start lifting. I mean,
That's how people become anorexic.
But you didn't. In that moment,
crazy.
You said, no, I know this. I want to deal with this
Thank God. That's a whole nother ride. You know, but that's exactly how it happens, is people, they don't ever want to go up the scale again, and it drives them further down and further crazy with antics to try to control their weight.
What did you want in that moment?
I wanted a solution. Like, I wanted to do something different than what I was doing, and what I knew was not going to work for the next 80 years. Like, I wanted to break out of the pattern of yo-yo dieting.
What did you want on a deeper level?
On a deeper level, I think I just wanted to stop the fight. The fight with food is hell. Like, it is a war. You know, the war with our bodies and ourselves is a war. I wanted to stop craving food and stop abusing myself with food.
It's like you wanted freedom, or you wanted to kind of relax, or peace.
Peace is really the thing I hear the most from my clients.
What was it for you, do you think, in that moment that you wanted or needed? What feeling did you
I think
want?
I was terrified of spending the rest of my life doing what I was doing. I think that's a scary thought. When you're in your 20s and just getting a window into the rest of your life and going up and down the scale for 80 years.
Like freedom from that path. You wanted a different future.
Completely. Yeah.
So it sounds like, the story goes, so then you met Roy.
Roy, who helped me.
And then over a period of time, you finally dealt with whatever it was.
Yeah, to be honest, once I stopped making it about food and weight and started going deeper, that's when things really started to change for me. I was able to start really unloading a lot of that pain, fear, and guilt that I talk about in the Pap formula. And that came from writing, that came from meditation, from
what
prayer.
Did come up for you as you kind of... So wait a minute. So you go to see him, and you roll in, and you're like, I don't want to do the cycle anymore. I'm just so tired of it. I want to be... And then, so how did he start?
Well, what it really starts with is feeling safe. You know, when I was in a therapeutic setting, I was in my head, and I still was keeping that pain locked in my heart. So I didn't fully feel safe in that setting. You know, you got to pack it all in after 50 minutes, and go home. It's like, you're in your head a lot. So what I felt is safety, and somebody who understood my problem. You can't really overcome an addiction unless you're talking to somebody who's had it. In my experience, that's kind of what the AA model is. You know, alcoholics can help alcoholics like nobody else can. Same thing with my emotional eating. Like he had been morbidly obese, understood the problem, understood what goes on up here when you have the problem. So that identification made me feel safe. That's what I do for my clients. As I lay it all out there, all the things I've done. I don't hold back. Like on my podcast, I talk about it. Like, I'm very transparent, and it makes people feel safe. And so I felt safety, and that safety allowed me to open up my heart and have that pain come tumbling out. And I had sexual abuse from my past. I had, kind of a dysfunctional family. It wasn't horrible, but it's run-of-the-mill dysfunction, that I had to face. Both my sisters had food addiction as well. So There was pain there, so that came tumbling out. And I also just started to find healing. Again, that connection with people who have had the same problem, that is very healing.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, and I started to have that as well. But plus, I started making changes in my life. Like it's an amalgam of things. Like I had to start changing my life. I had to stop doing things. There's a saying, I used to buy things that I didn't need to impress people I didn't like with money I didn't have. It's like that's a prescription.
Sounds like the American dream.
Right? So that's a problem. Like that, when we're dissonant with who we are, like I was doing stuff that wasn't who I was, trying to impress people. And it's like, you got to get real. You got to get real with who you really are. And that happens through, getting quiet, getting still, stopping all the noise, stop running at 100 miles per hour. Emotional eaters, I always say overeaters are overdoers. Like we are the best doers in the world. We are never stopping. We're always doing things. We're always volunteering for things. We're always running things. And that busy keeps us from hearing our heart and seeing what's really inside. So that, I had to change that. I had to stop running around, being all things to all people, and start getting still and quiet and find out who am I? It's like Julia Roberts on that Runaway Bride. She cooked every kind of egg, and she started trying the scrambled eggs because every boyfriend she was with, every fiance she was with, she was liking a different egg, and so she defined what kind of eggs do I actually like?
Which eggs do I like?
And so that's really the story of the emotional eater is we're chameleons, and we're so used to being all things to all people, and then we're out of alignment with who we are, and that creates, first of all, a resentment. It creates a feeling of isolation. It creates a feeling of being an imposter, a phony. I felt all those things. So I had to get real about who I really was, what I really wanted to do and didn't want to do, and start being aligned with that. Start having my actions match up to that.
So in the beginning of this with Roy, like I'm imagining if you were to do another diet, then the focus would be on, this food and this exercise schedule and counting these macros or carbs or whatever. I imagine when you started working with him, it looked different than that. But and the other thing that I want to ask at the same time is, as you're going through this therapy, it's not like you just forget about food and you're just eating whatever you want and you're getting into the deeper stuff. It's like, how do you balance both?
Yeah, it's not like, what's funny is, he told me early on, he's like, Tricia, your problem is not food. And I'm like, cool. And I went out and got a hamburger and fries. And then I told him, I'm like, this is the best news I've heard all day, And then he's like, let me rephrase that.
You like come into the next thing with like a bucket of ice cream. I'm like, I really like working with you.
Exactly.
You're just housing it down. You want to bite? And
Best just therapy like, ever. No, so I kind of revised that a little bit. And basically, it's not about food, but I have to, what it's really about is, again, who I am, what's going on inside, and the emotions that drive me to eat. If I'm going to be in touch with those emotions, I can't be eating burgers and fries and ice cream all the time because I'm not going to know what I'm feeling.
Give me some examples of what emotions for you came up, like specifics that you worked through.
I, at a very young age, I think probably because I had abuse as a kid, I was defended. I was very defended, and it felt strong.
Like defensive? Standoff? What do you mean defended?
I mean more, I guess, sort of defensive and aggressive at the same time. So anger was
guarded.
Guarded is maybe a better word. I had a lot of anger. Granted, I had a lot of, had a smile on my face all the time because I was a people pleaser. But underneath, I was often angry and resentful. And that was hard for me because I wanted so much to be liked and for people to see me as this happy-go-lucky, cheerful person, which I was. But underneath, there was a current of anger. And what I learned through the work that I did is that was a defense mechanism that came from, at a very young age, from abuse. Like you just learn, like I found that,
safe.
Yeah, if I hate, then I'll feel protected. Like hate makes you
keep the guard up.
Exactly. Yeah. Makes you feel protected. So it worked for me as a kid. It did not work for me as an adult. And what I find is a lot of the traits of the emotional eater are things that were coping tools as a child, and they just overstayed their welcome. and as an adult they don't work anymore, and they drive our eating.
There was
that
a
one of
time when
them.
it made sense for you to
Completely.
develop this defense mechanism, especially if
Completely.
you had sexual abuse, some
Yeah.
kind of abuse, and then it's like, whoa, we
Yeah,
got to
if
keep
that's
the
the only
guard
way to
up.
protect yourself is to hate, or to feel protected, then that you need that. That's a gift from God, But again, as an adult, it doesn't work so well.
Now you mentioned earlier to me, so you're kind of focusing on food and weight, but did these things affect relationships or work or other
Totally.
aspects of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I had a fear of intimacy for sure. So my romantic relationships weren't wonderful. It's like I had a fear of people getting to know me, so I was not good with long-term relationships.
What was that? Did I read something more about that
Probably
in your book? Yeah.
Probably, yeah, I think, and that's very typical for people who have emotional eating issues. I had a lot of body shame, so I didn't really want my body to be seen, no matter what weight I was. I could be thin at certain times. Like, I'd look back at pictures and I'm like, wait, I wasn't fat, but I had fat head. So I talk about that in my book. Fat head. Like, you think you're fat and you're actually not that fat or at all. Like,
I have a word for that's called dysmorphia.
This body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I call it fat head. So
yours is probably more memorable and
it's the truth. I saw myself as fat. And there are other times when I was overweight and I'm like, I'm doing pretty good. And then I look at a photo, I'm like, I don't remember being that weight, So it's just, we don't have a sufficient way of evaluating ourselves for sure.
the mirror's warped.
Very
and distorted,
warped.
Yeah.
So, so again, in relationships, that's tough because you don't want your body to be seen. And I had a lot of shame about my body. So that complicates sexual relations for sure, lack of self-confidence. Lack of self-esteem is a huge thing for emotional eaters. So we kind of like undersell ourselves, or we sell ourselves short a lot. We end up with people who are abusive or people who are just not great guys or great people. And that's, people will value us at the value we place on ourselves. So while it's easy to say there's lots of jerks out there, I was the one dating them. So where's the problem? It was my own self-esteem.
Right, but it's more complicated than that too, because consciously you're not self-sabotaging, right? It's kind of this
it's not
subconscious
conscious.
stuff.
No, it's not conscious at all. I mean, it's not. Of course not.
Yeah.
We always think, who would go out to date a jerk? You don't do that. You dress things up in a way that it isn't in reality. We don't
pursue what feels good and safe.
Yeah, it's old patterns. Those are that subconscious is powerful.
So it's so powerful.
It is so powerful, and if we don't get in there and address that stuff,
it's genius at keeping you safe.
Yeah, it's running the show all the time, no matter our best efforts, no matter how much motivational stuff we do, no matter how many books we read. If we don't dig in and start addressing that dark stuff that people don't want to deal with, especially emotional eaters, we're going to have the same relationship over and over and over again with ourselves and others.
The pattern will repeat.
Completely.
So let me ask you a couple questions. Let's say somebody's listening to this, they kind of identify with emotional eating and what you're saying. What are a couple things that they could do right now to kind of take a step in the right direction as opposed to continuing these patterns?
Yeah, I think obviously this is going to be very helpful, so thanks for having me on this show. I think this is great. It's a great conversation, and I think just the awareness is going to be a great first start for sure. I think stopping dieting, just make a decision, stop chasing a quick fix.
What does stopping dieting mean?
It means don't chase the next, when you feel fat and you feel like you ate too much at holiday time or Valentine's Day or whatever, don't pull that thing off, that magazine off the shelf in the checkout line and get seduced by yet another diet. Just don't do it, because it will not. 98% of all diets fail.
I'm imagining not doing that and somebody feeling trapped in this anxiety and these feelings.
Yeah.
And there's an obsessive nature where you can't control the feelings, whatever. And the way you feel better is you grab the diet.
Yeah, it's a desperate.
You get on the treadmill and you eat the celery.
Your house is on fire. You want to put it out as fast as possible. That's what it feels like when you've gained 5, 10, 15 pounds and you just feel disgusting and you're just like, get it off of me fast. That's why any new diet, even the you know, the healthy ones, you know, the intermittent fasting or the keto. These are fads to the emotional eater. The research is there for helping your body and longevity, but the emotional eater translates into this is another fix for me. This is the answer. We're just so seduced, so easily seduced. That's what the diet industry is, a multi-billion-dollar industry.
So you would say don't do the next latest diet.
Yeah,
Instead
don't do it.
Instead, do what?
Start going deeper. Go to my website, take the quiz, find out where you are on the spectrum. The
What's
emotional
the
eater
quiz?
It's a quiz that'll tell you where. Like, remember I talked about
how
the spectrum?
severe it is.
Yeah. Are you an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between? I'd say start there.
Wait a minute. Are you an emotional eater or a food addict? These
low
are
end of the
different?
spectrum is emotional eating.
Oh, okay.
High end of the spectrum is food addiction.
So severe emotional eating would be food addiction. Okay.
Precisely, yeah. And you're somewhere on that spectrum.
Okay.
So I'd say take the quiz, find out where you are on the spectrum, and then I give people very specific things they can do based on that. I highly recommend that people listen to my podcast because it's going to train them into thinking a whole new way about this problem.
Where's your podcast?
It's on iTunes and Stitcher and on my website. So my website's healyourhunger.com.
Okay.
And then on iTunes, it's the Heal Your Hunger show.
Okay.
So it's also on YouTube as well. And then beyond that, I mean, the important thing is not to try to do this alone. People are certainly welcome to read my book. The book alone is not going to be enough because remember I talk about connection and community. You can't read a book and just do this. Food addiction is the hardest addiction, bar none, to overcome. Why? Because you have to eat 3 times a day. Like, you can't put the plug in the jug.
There's no cold turkey, yeah.
Yeah, you can't do it. You have to take your addiction out 3 times a day. Say it's like taking the tiger out of the cage, petting the kitty, and then putting it back in the cage 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. It's treacherous, you know? It's like it's your main obsession. So you gotta like lock arms with people who are doing the same thing so you have more strength, so you have support, so you have identification, you don't feel like you're a weirdo, you know? So that's super important is like just get out of the idea that you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do it on your own. It's not going to happen.
I think that part is great advice, and that's so hard, especially for men. Yeah. Especially for men.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's an admission when you, at some level, say to yourself, I can't do it alone.
Yeah, I mean, people don't mind hiring trainers, right? They know they're not going to go to the gym and work out as hard if they don't have a trainer.
There's an added shame, brokenness. I can't do this on my own. I'm not effective. I'm not independent.
I should be able to do it myself.
There is all of that stuff.
It's hogwash. This is the hardest addiction to overcome, bar none. It's like, of course we have to have support. Of course we need guidance, you know? Otherwise you're going to slip back in that diet mentality. This food's good, that food's bad. You're just going to be beating yourself up when you eat the wrong thing, you know? It's like you gotta pull out of that, and you need guidance. In my experience, I needed a coach, I needed a guide for that. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what I try to be for other people, and it makes makes the whole path so much easier and lighter. So the other thing I recommend is not skipping meals. You know, intermittent fasting is really big right now. It's, again, like the research is there, but not for an emotional eater. You got to take that into account.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like, and it's fine putting 12 hours between your dinner and your breakfast. I think that's great, you know, but blowing through breakfast and trying to starve, most emotional eaters just blow it and they end up binging, you know, so that's a tough one for people as well. And again, it's another failed diet. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't even do intermittent fasting. Everybody else is doing it, you know, or I can't do keto, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's just people need to understand that if you're an emotional eater, it's not that easy. You know, you got to take other things into account. One thing we didn't talk about is the anatomy of the emotional eater, which are 24 personality traits that have nothing to do with food that need to be addressed.
Willfulness, self-judgment, hypercriticism, raging mind,
the number
loneliness, these kind of things.
People pleasing.
Oversensitivity. People pleasing is number one. That's surprising.
Oh, it's not number one in the book, but that's the one I see the most of people is people pleasing.
How does people pleasing result in emotional eating?
Because
because they sacrifice themselves? And
so here's how it goes down. Just people might relate to this. So emotional eaters, again, we have abuse as children, or things didn't go right as kids, and we didn't get a strong sense of self-esteem. Typically, not always, but typically, we didn't get a strong sense of ourselves. So we're looking outside ourselves for validation. We grow, again, it's a coping tool. We bring it into adulthood, and we're always doing the extra projects at work, running the PTA, doing, like, always volunteering, doing extra, always hosting the parties. It's like we're killing ourselves, giving, doing, because it feeds us. It, like, gives us that validation that we don't have for ourselves. We don't have boundaries on our time. The problem with that, Larry, is that when we overgive, we end up resentful and also exhausted, because we've, like, just put ourselves out, knocked ourselves out trying to give so much. So resentment and being exhausted and have our adrenals shot, it's a perfect prescription for what I call the I deserve it binge. Like, we go home and we're like, well, screw them, like, they don't appreciate me, I'm gonna reward myself, right? And there we just go down that path. But it's a perfect example of the way we need to change how we live. Like, not how we eat as much as how we live, which informs how we eat.
I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about the times when I have done this, and I've been like, oh yeah, and I just eat something, and then it feels really good for.
Yeah.
You take my little Taco Bell binge, right?
Yeah,
it feels
hour and
really
a half
good.
or so.
So there's a part of me that likes being treated well like that, even though it isn't good for my health, or I'm gonna feel like crap in a couple hours.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you see what I mean? Like, how do you?
I do. I mean, part of
that
that is just, when you don't have other ways of making yourself feel good, and if you push yourself too hard. I mean, we typically tend to not have boundaries on our time, and also meditation's a big part of my life because it helps me reset. So in the afternoon, when you get that slump, and that's when you tend to nibble or snack on things that hospitals have tons of, the workroom or whatever has tons of crappy food, any office environment, right? And that's when you start snacking. That's when I go to my car and I meditate. And
You've replaced it.
Yeah, and I get this instant energy boost from that. Now, that may seem crazy to people, but it works, and there's no adverse side effects.
Yeah.
So I've learned I go for a walk, I pick up the phone and I call a friend. I get the oxytocin running. There are other
ways
things.
to, instead of turning to food in that moment for the hit, other ways to.
Yeah. Movies are great.
Other ways to self-soothe in a healthy way.
Yeah, I just went to a movie last night. It relaxes my brain, gets me out of myself.
What did you see?
I saw 1917.
Is it any good?
It's good, yeah. It's good. It's very suspenseful. But the point is, we all need a break. We all need to veg out and chill out. It's just that the food is a double-edged sword. It feels good in the moment. It feels real bad when we eat too much. And then we got to deal with the consequences of that. So there's better ways, better ways of treating ourselves, soothing ourselves, and also getting to the underlying stuff that compels us to eat.
You've been doing this and kind of maintaining this for decades. Is it still a struggle now sometimes? Or do you feel like, I've done this enough, you've got the habits, you've kind of got it down?
No, I mean, my experience, I've got a lot of experience with this, and it hasn't been smooth sailing all the time. I've had times when it's been hard. Those times were usually when I felt I'd stopped doing my self-care. Like, I just kind of wasn't really taking good care of myself. So I didn't have the substitute. Like, you can't just take food away. Like, a lot of our problems have to do with stress and stress eating. So I need ways to cope with stress. And if I don't have the proper ways to cope with stress, food will be looking right at me, and it'll look really good. Mm-hmm. So anytime that I've had struggles, I don't right now, thank God, but anytime I have had struggles, it's been because I let the stress pile up without offloading it in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. Garbage in, garbage out. Like, we got to get the stress off of us, because when it piles up, it's like food's right there. I don't feel like I'm cured. Like, I feel like I can go right back to that unhealthy way of living if I'm not daily addressing this.
So you got to do the work and maintain.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm, I don't feel like there's a cure. Like, the cure thing, I don't find is realistic.
Yeah.
I feel like
and dealing
I'm
and managing.
I call myself healed. Like, I've healed one day at a time, but I don't use the cure idea because I've learned from bitter experience that it can come back.
Yeah.
If I'm not doing the things that I teach other people to do.
How long did it take before you kind of felt like you had a handle like this? Years? Couple years?
Well, I'd say my first year of really healing, I felt like it was totally different for me.
Yeah.
But you still got to grow up. I mean, there's all, when we've packed down those emotions for so long, there's a lot that needs to come out. And there's a lot of new ways of living that we have to learn. We have to learn to speak up for ourselves. We have to learn to set boundaries on our time, which is hard when you're a people pleaser. Say no to somebody, that's really uncomfortable. So it's like we have to learn these things. So it's not all, instantaneous.
It's like growing up to be an adult.
Yeah, it is.
Adulting.
It is just adulting, and it's just latent because I stuffed for so long. I just stuffed a lot of emotions for so long. I gotta go and kind of learn how to do this stuff. So.
Good. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks.
So tell us again, where can they get this book? Where can we follow you?
Everything's at healyourhunger.com.
Okay.
HEAL, healyourhunger.com.
HealYourHunger.com.
Yep.
Is there social media people can find you at?
Yes, that's same for Instagram and also for Facebook.
It's Heal Your Hunger on Instagram?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yep. And definitely go to my website and take the quiz, the emotional eating quiz, and find out where you are on the spectrum. That's a good way to get started.
Okay.
And then also my podcast, I'm happy for people to tune into.
Heal Your Hunger.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's great.
No, this was fun. This was good.
Really great.
So we're going to have you close out the show into the camera and whatever you would like to say.
Oh, I'm going to say something?
Yeah.
What do you want?
Like to I'm like
To the audience.
To the audience.
You can just say whatever you want.
Yeah, you don't have to suffer anymore. I mean, you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer in silence. There's a way out. And, I've been there. I've been where you are. And I'm just happy to report the good news. You don't have to live that way anymore.
Wow. That's great. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Take a screenshot. Tag me on social media and Heal Your Hunger. I'd love to see it. I will reply. If you have somebody that's got a moment that would be good for the show, let me know. Reach out to Dr. Larry Burchett on social media. We'll see you next time. So I know you because I saw you on a TV show.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Did you know? Do you remember that? It's been a while.
Do I remember?